Let me at 'em! Attack!
Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the series. Today we are going to begin by exploring 5 fascinating things about the Barrens that you might not know about. Number 1. The history of the Barrens. Now, the Barrens as you know it has not always been this desert grassland that has been so iconic to us World of Warcraft players. In fact, it was actually once a thriving forest under the protection of the Night Elves. That's right, the Night Elves once ruled this land, with several Keldorai settlements dotting the landscape. However, then came the Burning Legion and the Great Sundering, and unfortunately the whole area was transformed into a scorched plain. While this happened more than 10,000 years ago, it is nonetheless cool to note how the land is still left with a few pockets of green, with numerous oases dotting the landscape, of which several of the quests in these areas are all about bringing back green life to the region. So, as you journey through the Barrens, remember that you're treading upon land that has a lot of hidden history. Number 2. Bael Modan. Most of us would know the Barrens as a Horde zone. However, some of us might not know that there actually exists an entire dwarven establishment within the Barrens, known as none other than Bael Modan. Located at the southeastern section of the Barrens, Bael Modan, which stands for the Red Mountain in Dwarven, is actually heralded by some as the new home of the dwarves and gnomes on Kalimdor. So this is not just a small outpost, but a formidable fortress, highly defensible with a sizable population. Alliance caravans and travelers crossing the Barrens are often offered shelter within its walls. The iconic part of Bael Modan is that it houses a giant archaeological dig site, the largest in all of Kalimdor. Nearly 1,000 dwarves dig around the clock to uncover the most significant set of Titan ruins discovered since Uldaman. Now, considering the size, significance and scope of Uldaman, this is a huge area and has been pretty much underplayed in WoW. The aforementioned travelers, while welcome in Bael Modan, are not allowed within the Titan ruins, of which few non-dwarves ever receive such an honor. Bael Modan was once next to a Tauren village, but in conflicts between the dwarves and Tauren, caused by the dwarves excavating for Titan artifacts in land the local Tauren consider holy, most of the Tauren were killed or driven off of their ancestral lands. There is an entire event that occurs around Camp Torajo involving this, and hence why you see Tauren battling with the dwarves at the excavation site. Now, what exactly are these Titan ruins? Those of us currently playing WoW just got a first big hand encounter of the Titans and their pantheon. Well, over 100,000 years ago, the Titans built great laboratories throughout Azeroth. Bael Modan was one such site. The Titans encrypted their research on blended platinum discs in a runic language now forgotten to mortal races. If you can remember, we actually do encounter such a set of discs in Uldaman and Ulduar. The site at Bael Modan served the Titans as a storage facility for these discs. In other words, something like a great library of sorts, overflowing to the brim with information and knowledge. Now here's a juicy bit of info. When game designer David Kosak was asked what quest was he most proud of making, he stated without giving too much away that he was most proud of doing the Southern Barrens, especially Bael Modan. A lot of epic things are going to happen there that I am immensely proud of. Some beautiful, beautiful things. Now, we don't know exactly what this refers to, but I have my suspicions that it can't just simply be about the current quest chain involving Bael Modan, which is kind of underwhelming. Post-Cataclysm, a Bael Dun excavator standing before the cave can actually be interacted with by Alliance players, and he says something very interesting. Turn away. Before the Cataclysm hit, we found something. We dug something up that should have stayed buried. Pray to whatever you believe in that the landslide was enough to keep it down. Pretty foreboding words. Now, other than speculation, it's difficult to say what this accurately refers to. The one thing that comes to mind is, of course, something to do with the old gods, as anything evil and sinister in conjunction with the Titans is most probably that. As the new expansion Battle for Azeroth approaches, It remains to be seen if this particular area will finally get the prominence it deserves. And hopefully the dwarves finally learn a lesson about all that digging. Number 3. Fray Island. Now here's a really interesting one. Located off the eastern coast of the Barrens, just a little south of Ratchet, lies an island known as Fray Island. As the name would indicate, it is a unique location for brawls and the training of warriors. A small number of quests are linked to this area, mostly to do with warriors, but have been revamped due to the Cataclysm. Unfortunately, post-Cataclysm, the island has been overrun by pirates, and the iconic training area no longer exists. Nevertheless, there are several very interesting things about this island. 1. If you take a dive under the port area of the island, you would actually see a ring of NPCs underwater. This group of guys, known as Fray Challengers, were the previous NPCs that inhabited the island pre-Cataclysm. It's pretty humorous when you first see it, but also kinda shocking of how Blizz just decided to leave them there. A major oversight to say the least. My only deduction would be that so few people ever visit this island for them to warrant even making the change to take them out, which is kinda sad, and hopefully the new leveling changes would fix them. 2. One of the buildings on the island actually has the wrong music associated with it. The back rooms of the house just left of the fighting ring have had the regular Barrens background music replaced by that of the Howling Fjord, following the release of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. The reason for this is that the entire building was simply copied over from the Howling Fjord, and the developers simply forgot to change the default music for that model. Now, I'm just gonna let you guys hear a little bit of it, of how it cuts off abruptly and changes to another soundtrack altogether. This was eye-opening to me as I have no experience in programming whatsoever, and so to me I thought that the soundtracks would be associated with the zones more so than actual specific buildings. But yes, yet another Blizzard oversight, although this one I gotta admit is pretty cool, so no harm leaving it there. 3. For those of you guys wanting to farm rep with our good old goblin friends of the Steam Weedle Cartel, this place is pretty good for it. It's isolated, no one quests there, anymore at least, the mobs are low level and respawn pretty quickly. Captain Garvey will give around 12 to 13 reputation points, and the other South Sea pirates will give around 2 to 3 reputation points. A good place to farm for the Insane in the Membrane achievement. So a pretty unusual island to say the least. Make sure you take a trip down there when leveling a new Horde character. Number 4. Northwatch Hold. Northwatch Hold is an alliance fortress located between the Merchant Coast in Southern Barrens and Duskwallow Marsh, of which its forces serve none other than Lady Proudmoore of Theramore, more commonly known as Jaina. Now, to me, Northwatch Hold is one of the more prominent areas of the Barrens, not because there's anything unusual about it, but because of where it's positioned. If we take a look at the map, we can clearly see how close this Alliance bastion is to the Horde capital itself, Orgrimmar. I mean, it's ridiculously close. It's right there. I know that this map isn't canon, and it's most likely not geographically to scale, but it still highlights the issue that there is a huge Alliance naval base extremely close to the Horde capital. If you're from America or you know American history, this is almost akin to having Cuba at her doorstep during the Cold War. From a militaristic point of view, it's pretty crazy, and such dynamics help us to understand how these would have only contributed to Garrosh's paranoia, providing him with ample reasons to attack or retaliate against the Alliance. To make matters worse, it was indeed Thrall that granted the people of Theramore and Jaina his word that they will be safe at Theramore. And we all know of what Garrosh thinks of Thrall and his weak peacemaking ways with the Alliance. Also, let's not forget about what we just talked about in Bael Modan, yet another Alliance dwarven stronghold. That's 2 Alliance fortresses extremely close to Orgrimmar. And if we include Theramore, which I know was bombed, but pre-Cataclysm, that's 3 gigantic Alliance forts surrounding the immediate area of the Horde capital. It's easy to see how Garrosh might feel as though he was under constant threat from the Alliance, while in comparison, Stormwind is relatively safe and far away from any Horde encroachers. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the Alliance is more hostile than the Horde or vice versa, neither am I defending Garrosh's actions. I'm just putting these points out there to put things into perspective. Even we as human beings in the real world would sometimes overreact in such tense situations. Number 5. Barrens Chat. Alright, now on to number 5. Saving the best for last, we have none other than the most infamous and iconic Barrens Chat. Now for those of you guys that didn't get to experience this during vanilla, allow me to just paint a short background for you of how this dynamic came about. Basically, the Barrens was a very early starter zone that shared borders with the Orcs, Tauren, and Trolls. So that was 3 out of the 4 playable Horde races in vanilla WoW that would all converge together very early in the game. In other words, a melting pot of new players. The volume of chat was thus not only very high, but the quality of the chat soon degenerated, as it always does, into flaming, irrelevant questions and answers, off-topic discussions, and so on. I would like to read a quote from WoWWiki that succinctly summarizes what the Barrens Chat is. It's bloody awesome. Here goes. Barrens Chat is like a stupidity centrifuge, distilling the unexpurgated banal thoughts of 1,000 morons into a hardened, impenetrable lump of smack-tardery, spilling endlessly across the bottom of your screen. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view, the Barrens Chat has become all but extinct, as most trolls or players that enjoy provoking others into confrontation spend their days in trade chat in the main cities. Especially with the introduction of the random dungeon finder system, characters level 15 and higher spend their time leveling through dungeons, so the Barrens is fairly, well, barren now. Nevertheless, most players look back upon this time with warm nostalgia, never wanting to go through it again, but still glad that they had managed to experience it once. And that's a nice list of 5 fascinating things about the Barrens. I hope you've managed to learn something new about this awesome zone, and that you might even be inspired to level a new character through it, especially with the new leveling style coming ahead in WoW for patch 7.3.5. I will be doing more of such zone content for the remainder of this series, so be sure to hit that subscribe and notification button if you wish to be regularly injected with a nice warm dose of nostalgia. I'll see you in Azeroth.